Hello humans, my name is Kohya GUI and I am back again, Shade is back, tell a friend, and welcome to the third video in the LoRa training series, where I'll show you how to train anything you want for Stable Diffusion using LoRa. And in today's video, I will show you how to train any clothes or outfits for your AI characters. So if you ever wondered how to generate images of yourself wearing cool outfits, well, today is your lucky day. Now this video will be an add-on to my first general LoRa training video, so I will not be repeating the same thing over and over again. So if you haven't watched that, Koya SS GUI. Now again, in this video I'm not gonna show you how to install it manually, because I showed how to do that in my previous LoRa video in details. But if you don't want to do it yourself, I created a simple to use one-click installer for my Patreon supporters that will install everything automatically. You don't need to do anything. Oh, and also if you want, I have a one-click Stable Diffusion installer that once again will install everything you need automatically. No effort required whatsoever. I really offer a bunch of cool stuff on my Patreon, like exclusive models, training presets, and cool pieces of software that I will show you later in the video. So if you can, I definitely recommend you to become a Patreon supporter today to have access to all of these cool tools and files right now. The link for it will be in the description down below. So once we have Koya SS installed, we can start the first step for the LoRA Clothing training, which is dataset preparation. And boy oh boy, I'm gonna tell you right now, it's really hard. I spend an insane amount of time trying to understand what is the best way to prepare a dataset for clothes training, which is why this video took me around 4 weeks to make. And that is because training clothes or outfits is really not the same as training a real character. But don't worry, I will explain everything in details right now. So the first thing that you want to do is of course search for the best images possible of the clothes or outfits that you want to train. So let's just say that for this example, I want to train the famous yellow Cyberpunk 2077 jacket that you can see right here. Now obviously the first thing that you need to do is to choose the highest resolution possible for your image. And to do this, you can either come here, click on tools, then click on size, and then choose large, which will then display a bunch of high resolution images of your search query. And you can either do this or to use the Google Advanced Image Search option. Just put your keywords right here. Under image size, you're gonna choose anything larger than 2 megapixel and then click on Advanced Search, which will basically give you a better selection of images to choose from. However, here, compared to character training or style training, not only you need to find high resolution images, but you also need to find images that display the clothes properly. And by far the best images to choose from are photos of real people wearing those clothes. These are really the best images that you can get, because this actually shows Stable Diffusion XL how a real person is supposed to wear those clothes. Now I'm not saying that choosing this kind of image is bad per se, because in our example it is a simple jacket. Stable Diffusion XL knows exactly what a jacket is and how a person is supposed to wear it. But also remember that when someone is wearing a clothes, the way the elements align when someone wears it is different compared to an image where the jacket is not worn by anyone. So yes, once again, make sure that you choose images of the clothes being worn either by a real person or a mannequin, because this will give a little bit more visual cues to Stable Diffusion XL into understanding how something is supposed to look like when a real person wears the item. And of course, as always, make sure that you have a bunch of images of the clothes under different angles, under different lighting, as long as they perfectly showcase the clothing item in details. But what if you want to train an image of some uniform only present in a movie? How would you do that if there isn't enough images of that on the internet? Well, you can either open the movie on your computer and manually do some screenshot from the movie itself, or you can simply look for cosplays of real people wearing those outfits in conventions or just for fun. And believe me, these are really easy to find. People really like to cosplay, I'm gonna tell you that much. But again, make sure that you have a good selection of photos of different people wearing the outfits that perfectly shows the outfit. And for example, in our case, since the jacket is found inside the video game, you can of course use any screenshots from the video game directly, which definitely makes things a little bit easier. And the minimum amount of images that you need to find for a good close training would be around 10 images. But those images really need to be top notch and showcase the clothing item perfectly in every angle other than different lighting and situation. Okay, so for this example, I downloaded a few images just to show you what we need to do next, because if you think that we are done, you would be wrong, because we really are not done. And the reason why we are not done is because when you actually use an image like that, for example, for LoRa training, even if you only want to train the jacket, well, guess what's gonna happen? Stable Diffusion will actually learn everything in that entire image. It's gonna learn the face, it's gonna learn the gun, it's gonna learn the pose, it's gonna learn the t-shirt, it's gonna learn the background. Every single detail will be learned by Stable Diffusion. Meaning that if you only want to train the jacket, we will need to do some modification to the image. Because if we leave the image like that, next time that you will want to generate an image of, like, for example, a woman wearing this yellow jacket, Stable Diffusion XL will basically generate an image of a woman with basically the same face as this man, in a very similar looking position, and with a very similar cyberpunk background. And that is because Stable Diffusion XL thinks that this entire thing, this entire image, is part of the outfit, which is why to do this correctly, we need to help Stable Diffusion XL a little bit. So to make this particular image viable for training, we need to do two things. First is to remove the background completely and preferably replace it with a plain white background. And the second thing that we need to do is to hide the face. Because again, if we just leave the face on, Stable Diffusion will think that the face is part of the outfit, which again is definitely something that we don't want to do. So how exactly do we do that? How do we remove the background of an image and then censor the face? Well, you can either do it with Photoshop if you have it on your computer, so you can simply right click on the image, open with Photoshop, and if you have the latest version of Photoshop, you have here a very cool remove background button that if you click on it, will automatically remove the background. Now unfortunately it removed a lot of detail that I didn't want removed, which is not a problem because I can just select the white brush, click on the mask, and then paint over the areas that were erased during the background deletion. Now I can either do that, or I can just come back completely, click on this button right here to select the subject, which will basically make the exact same selection as before, but this time I'm gonna select here the quick selection tool, zoom in the image, and then I'm gonna start selecting all the areas that I want to keep in the image. For example, like this color that I want to keep, that is part of the jacket. I also want to keep part of his hand and part of the jacket right here. And if there is an area of the image that I want to erase, that I don't want to keep, I can just hold Alt, which will change the icon of my brush to a minus, and then if I select this whole area, it will be erased from the selection. And once we have selected everything we wanted to keep, you're gonna come here and click on this mask button right here, which will automatically create a mask and remove everything that we did not keep. So that the next thing that we want to do is replace that empty background by a plain white background. So for this, very simple, you're gonna click here, create a new layer, put that layer below, select the paint bucket tool, select the white color, and then click anywhere on the image. And there you go. Now we have a plain white background. And now the next thing that we need to do is to hide the face. And for this, it is actually very simple and very easy to do. You're gonna come here, click on new layer, then you're gonna select the lasso tool, and then you're gonna make a selection over the entire face, just like that. Then you're gonna select the black color and the paint bucket tool, and then click over the selection to paint this entire area black. And now if you press Ctrl D to deselect the selection, we are basically done. That's really all we need to do. Now before we save the image, the one that is left for us to do is to actually use the cropping tool to crop all the empty space and also the top of the image. And again, we really don't need the face, we just need to leave the entire jacket present in the image, with basically the bottom of the face completely censored by a black blob. And now if you click on done, we are now ready to save the file and do the same for the next images. And to save the image very simply, very easily, you're just gonna click here, flatten the image, and then simply press Ctrl S and then click OK to save the image. And voila, we are done. And now that this is done, we can do the same thing for every single image. Yeah, I'm not kidding. This really takes a lot of time, but it is the best way to train in clothes or outfits for Stable Diffusion. So again, for each image, you're gonna right click, open with Photoshop, remove the background, replace it with a white background, then censor the face using the black blob, and then crop the image to only leave the jacket, then flatten the image, and then save it. And then repeat the process for every single one. However, this is only if you have Photoshop. What do you do if you don't have Photoshop installed on your computer? Well, no worries, because for this you can use a free alternative called photopea.com, which is basically a free Photoshop online. And to use this, it's very simple, just drag and drop your image onto the website, and then to automatically remove the background, you can click on select, and then click on remove BG, which will automatically remove the background of your image, exactly as if this was Photoshop. And it is actually pretty decent. Like, of course, it's not exactly perfect, but just like Photoshop, if you select the white part, you can bring back all the parts of the image that were erased and that you want to keep, or use use the black brush to erase things that you don't want to keep in the image. And another free tool that you can use to remove the background automatically, which actually often works even better than Photoshop itself, is a website called photoroom.com, which again is really easy to use. Just drag and drop your image onto the website, and in only a few seconds, it automatically removes all the background of the image. And it did an even better job than Photoshop, so that's really cool. And from this, you can even replace the background with a white background, a black background, a blue background, or any color you want. So in our case, you can just select the white and then click on download and select standard resolution. And from this, if again you don't have Photoshop, you can use Photopea and select the image we just created by clicking on open from computer and selecting the image, and then use basically the exact same thing that we did for in Photoshop, which is creating a new layer, then selecting the face, then select the paint bucket tool and the black color, and then painting over the face. And again, you are done. So as you can see, you don't even need Photoshop to do the exact same thing with the same level of quality and speed. Just again, do not forget to crop the image, to only leave the important details, click here to confirm, and then once you're done, click on file, and then export as PNG or JPEG to save it on your computer. Now once you have all your images, where you remove the background and then censor the face, you might think that we're done, right? Well, unfortunately we're not done quite yet, because one thing that you need to understand is that dataset is king. So you really need to not be lazy if you want to have the best results possible, which is why we need to go the extra mile to make sure we have the perfect, cleanest dataset possible. So here's actually a small trick that allows you to double or even triple the amount of images that you have, which is actually crucial if you want to have a lot of details from the clothing item in your images. And the first trick that we can use is to actually reuse that exact same image, but by splitting the image into 2 or 3 different parts, like for example a top and a bottom, or even a top, a middle and a bottom, where you would actually have a close-up of the details of the jacket so that Stable Diffusion XL understands perfectly and have more info on how the clothing item is supposed to look like. So actually my advice to you is to choose a selection of the best images possible of your clothing item under different angles, and then take one of those images and copy and paste it twice. So for example, I'm gonna select this image, I'm gonna press Ctrl C to copy it, and then press Ctrl V twice. So now we have 2 copies of that one image. And what we're gonna do is with the first copy, we're gonna select it, then click on edit image, and then we're gonna crop that image to only leave the top of the clothing item, just like that. And then click on save. Because now if you take a look at this image, you can see that we are now way more focused on this area of the jacket, meaning that you can see very precisely how the jacket is supposed to look like. And this will help Stable Diffusion understand all the small details of the clothing item. And now that we did that for the top, you're gonna do the same thing with the second copy, again edit image, but this time we only want the bottom of the jacket. However, one thing that I actually recommend if you are doing that is to actually cut above a recognizable item on the jacket. So like for example here we have a very recognizable silver horizontal strap that I'm actually gonna leave in the image, just like that for example, and then click on save, because now if you take those images side by side, you can see that we have a recurring item in both images. You have here the horizontal silver band that is also present in the second image, meaning that when you kind of put them all together, it's kind of a little bit easier to understand how the image is supposed to be stitched, which again not only will provide a little bit more info, a little bit more details to Stable Diffusion on how the clothing is supposed to look like, but will also make it easier for Stable Diffusion to stitch those images together to create a single coherent piece. And then once you're done, you're gonna do the same thing for every single image. Just take an image, select it, Ctrl C to copy it, then press Ctrl V twice, then select an image, click on edit, only leave the top, then save, and do the same thing for the other image, but this time with only leaving the bottom portion of the jacket. And there you go. And now you're gonna do the same thing for every other angle. And then in the end, you should have this kind of selection of a bunch of different images under different angle, different lighting, and different people wearing the clothes. And you can either leave all of those images like that, or you can make these even sharper by upscaling them inside Stable Diffusion. Again, if you don't know how to do it, I showed how to do that in my previous style LoRa training video. Just go to the extras tab, choose batch from directory, choose the input and output directory, and choose the RESR GAN for X Plus for the upscaler, so that in the end you get some very sharp and high resolution image. Now you might think that again we are done, right? But unfortunately, if we leave the images like that in one single folder, we might actually encounter a small issue. Because we have a bunch of images that are zoomed in, if we train a model with those images alone, we might actually end up generating images that look like that are actually like very zoomed in, where you don't see the face of the person, or that are again way too zoomed in every single image we try to generate. And this is definitely something that we don't want, right? So how can we solve that? Well, this is actually a very small trick that I will show you very soon once we are creating our training folder. And speaking of training folder creation, well, this is actually the next step. But before we do that, let's actually enter the training presets that we're gonna use for the training. If you're actually one of my Patreon supporters, you will have access to 5 different training presets for training clothes and outfits for both local and RunPod installation. And to use it, it's very simple. You're gonna click on LoRa, click on configuration file, then open, and then select among the 5 training presets that will be available on my Patreon page. And for the first time, I highly recommend just using the normal Stable Diffusion XL clothes that have basically all the basic parameters for training. So just select that file and then click open, and then automatically all the best parameters for training will be selected automatically. You really don't need to do anything. The only fields that you need to change are the folders fields and your Stable Diffusion XL source model. So here just click on this little icon and then select your Stable Diffusion XL model. So in my case, it is right here. And there you go. Simple as that. So that now the only fields that we need to enter and modify are the location of the folder training. And you can either create the folder training yourself manually or to use the dataset preparation tab, which is obviously what I recommend you to do. Now, once again, I will not be going into much details onto what each field does. Again, I highly recommend you to watch my LORA training video if you haven't done it before, if you really want to understand what each section actually does. But here for clothes and outfit training, for the instance prompt and class prompt, here you're basically gonna input what is the closest item of clothing that is similar to the one you're trying to train, that Stable Diffusion XL knows exist. So like for example, in our case, it is definitely a yellow jacket that is more in a cyberpunky vibe, because now if we go inside Stable Diffusion and we input a very simple prompt such as woman wearing a yellow cyberpunk jacket, and then we click on generate, we get this type of image, which is really good. This is perfect. This is exactly the type of thing that we're looking for. Because when you look at the shape of the jacket and you compare it to the real thing, you can see a lot of similarities. The high color, the texture of the jacket, all of those things are really similar. Meaning that for this example, this is really the perfect token to use to start our training. However, you need to keep the following info in mind. First, if you want to have the best flexibility model possible, do not actually put the color of the clothes for the token. So basically here, do not put yellow cyberpunk jacket, because it will make it way harder for Stable Diffusion to generate anything other than a yellow jacket. So if you want to be able to generate images of the jacket in different colors, do not put any color for the instance prompt. Just leave, in our case, simply cyberpunk jacket. However, here is a little bit of a problem. If you want to train anything else, what exactly are you supposed to put here? I mean, again, if you remember correctly, for my first LORA training video, I used a website called Star by Face to find a celebrity that looks like the person you're trying to train and that exists inside Stable Diffusion XL. But how exactly are you gonna do that for a piece of item clothing? Well, you can obviously use Google to try to find what piece of clothing looks like the most like the one you're trying to train. It won't take you a lot of time. But if you don't know how to do that, or if you just don't have enough knowledge about all the different pieces of item clothing that exist, I actually prepared for my Patreon supporters a huge PDF file that covers a bunch of different pieces of item clothing and different uniforms and outfits, so that you can use that data inside the instance prompt and class prompt. It's very easy to use and very complete. Everything that you really need is inside that document. And again, the link for it will be in the description down below. So then here you're gonna select the training images folder, which for me is right here, and then here we have the number of repeats. And I gotta tell you, I played a lot with that option, and that number is actually really important. So basically, if you don't want to listen to my explanation, if you want a short TLDR, again, I found that the best repeat number for cloth training is simply 20. However, if you want the detailed explanation, this is actually not true, because the lower the number, the faster it's gonna train, but also the less it's gonna look like the clothing item that you're trying to train. Now from afar, it will still kinda look like what you're trying to train, it will still kinda look okay, and I suppose if you're okay with that, it's fine. But if you want the best results possible, in my experience, having here a higher number for repeats, such as 20, really yields the best results possible. Now once again, it kinda depends on what you're trying to train and what exactly you really want out of that training, because if you only want a cloth that kinda looks like what you're trying to train, with a little bit of resemblance, to kinda have a very similar vibe or very similar style, to have a lot of different variation of that clothing, in that case a repeats of 10 is more than enough. Like for example, if you are a fashion designer and you want to create similar looking pieces of clothing to what you already made before, or in that case the repeat number between 15 and 10 is really the best number for you. Or hell, even lower. I did a repeat number between 10 and 5 and I still got pretty decent results. So again, it really depends on what you want. But if you want to have the exact same pieces of clothing everywhere all the time, in that case for this number you're gonna input a number of 20. 20 repeats is really the golden number for the precise training type. And for the regularization images, just like with the style training, you really don't need them. They are really only useful if you're training a real person, which is why on my Patreon page you will only find regularization images for training a person and nothing else. So basically, if you want to train in clothing or a costume, you really don't need to bother with regularization images. So just leave this field empty, and then finally just choose a destination training directory, and then click on prepare training data, and do not forget to press copy info to folders tab, because now if you go to folders, all the fields will be filled automatically. And one of the last things that we need to do is to choose a model output name. So what I always do is basically first input what we are trying to train. So in our case it is a yellow Cyberpunk 2077 jacket, and then I separate it by the token that we use for the training. This way, since the token is inside the name, there is absolutely no way that we can forget it. So in our case, if you remember correctly, it was simply Cyberpunk jacket. Simple as that. Now before we go and look at the parameters for the training, there is still one or two things that we need to do. Yeah, I know, this is very long, but if you want to have the best results, you really need to do that. Because if you remember correctly, if we leave all of those images like that, when you have a bunch of images that are zoomed in, you might end up with those types of zoomed in images. So how can we prevent that? Well, just know that this is actually pretty optional. You don't necessarily need to do this to avoid those types of images. Sometimes it really depends on the type of clothing that you really want to train. But if you want to avoid the risk of having those types of images, here's what you can do instead. As you know, if we go inside our training folder, we have the image, the log, and the model folders. But if we go inside the image folder, we have one big folder inside that has all of our training images. And if you look at the name of the folder, 20_cyberpunk jacket, this actually means something. This is not some random gibberish. What this folder name actually means is that here the 20 is the amount of repetition that each image will receive, then you have an underscore, and then you have the instance prompt followed by the class prompt, because these are the tokens that we chose for the training. However, if we want to avoid these types of issues, if we want to avoid those types of image generation, the only thing that we really need to do is basically make sure that all of those zoomed in images are not repeated as often as the other images. And to do that is actually very simple. You simply go to select all of those zoomed in images, then right click, select cut, then go back, right click, new folder, and then here for the name of the folder, you're gonna input the same name as the folder that we have right here, but for the first value, instead of putting 20, you're gonna input half of that number. So in our case, since half of 20 is 10, I'm gonna input 10 right here. And then for the rest, input the same as the folder right here, which is underscore cyberpunk jacket. And now if we go inside, I'm gonna right click and then paste those images. And that's it. And now what's actually gonna happen is that technically the LORA Training will consider those two folders as technically two separate items. But since they have both the same name, they will be kind of merged into the same item. So now when you will start the training, all the images present inside the 20 Cyberpunk Jacket folder will be prioritized over the ones in the 10 Cyberpunk Jacket folder, because those images will be repeated less times than the ones inside the 20 Cyberpunk Jacket folder, meaning that you should get more images like these compared to these. Now, since we are on the subject of creating multiple folders, I think it is a good time for me to explain how instead of training a single item of clothing, you can train instead an entire outfit. So let's say, for example, that you want to train the outfit of Thomas Shelby from the show Peaky Blinders, which, by the way, I highly recommend you to watch it. If you haven't already, it is an absolutely amazing series, and also in the same type Broadwalk Empire, which is absolutely fantastic. Such an underrated series that no one talks about, but anyway, if you want to train an entire outfit, you see here that we have a bunch of problems, because this outfit is not only this entire suit, but you also have this very cool flap cap that they all wear during the entire show. But if you remember correctly, the way we did our dataset preparation is that we erased the background while also cropping the face. But unfortunately, if we do that, if we crop the face out of the image, we will only be able to train the outfit, the suit, but not the flap cap. Now technically it's not that much of a problem since Stable Diffusion XL knows what a flap cap is, but if we add something a little bit more complex, like a more complex hat, like how exactly can we do that? Well, you might be thinking, okay, well maybe instead of covering the entire face and cropping the face entirely, we could just blur it, right? Well, I mean that is a solution you can do if your repetition is not too high and your learning rate is not too high also, but unfortunately even if you do that, you will unfortunately end up in those types of situations where even the blurry face is now part of the image and part of the suit. So this does not work. But what we can do instead is use that exact same technique for the creation of multiple folders, because as I said, each folder basically represents a different item, meaning that very easily we could simply create a folder for the suit and a folder for the hat. And it basically should look something like this, where here you have basically the main folder, the Peaky Blinders suit, which basically represents images of the suit itself, but with the face cropped and censored, just like we did with the previous jacket. But now we have another folder called flat cap that, if we go inside, basically only shows images of the flat cap and nothing else. And once you do the training and you put them together, it gives you something like this, where you both have the suit and the cap inside the same image. So yeah, there you go. If you have multiple items that are part of the same outfit, just separate them in different folders so that they can be trained at the same time. Okay, so now that this is done, now that we have both our folders, there is still unfortunately one thing that we need to do before the training. Yes, I know, and if you've done LORA training before, you know what's coming, because this is by far the worst thing that you need to do before training in LORA. And you knew it's coming. Here it is. It's called captioning, which basically means that you're gonna go and describe every single image, which basically helps Stable Diffusion XL understand what exactly are you trying to train, what is part of the outfit and what is not part of the outfit. Now the good news is that actually, since we've done a lot of the work before, there isn't a lot of information that we really need to input. I mean, like for example, all we really need to describe is that this is a photo of a yellow cyberpunk jacket, and then we need to describe everything that is not part of the outfit. And for example, for this image, it is a blue t-shirt, some jeans, a censored face, which is very important to put in the caption. This is crucial, and also the white background. And that's it. So although it is annoying, it should not take a long time to do. Now to help us in this horrible task, we can use a tool inside Koya SS GUI called Blip Captioning that will basically do a lot of the work for us. And to use it, you're gonna go into Utilities, Blip Captioning, then you're gonna choose the folder where your images are located. So in my case, it is right here, then select folder, and then here for the prefix to add to Blip Caption, you're gonna add the instance prompt and the class prompt. So in our case, it was cyberpunk jacket. Now here in our case, since we only have images of a yellow cyberpunk jacket, we can also add that to the prefix. So it would be yellow cyberpunk jacket and then a little comma. And now if we click on caption images, it's basically gonna analyze every single one of the image, try to understand what it is, and then for each image it's gonna create a text file, a text document that will basically try its best to understand what this image is supposed to be. But unfortunately this is far from perfect, and unfortunately you're gonna have to modify each and every document, which is a huge pain in the butt. Oh, and also do not forget that since we created two different folders, you need to do the blip captioning for both folders. So in our case, once we selected the 20 cyberpunk jacket folder, we're gonna go ahead and then select the other folder. And to modify every text document, you can either just, open the image on one side and then the text document on the other. Or what you can do instead, which is much better and much easier, is to go back to Koya and select manual captioning. Then here you're gonna select your folder and then click on load. And this will basically present this really cool interface where you are both on each side the image and the text caption that you can then modify, and it will automatically be saved inside the text document, which is really super practical. Now, here's the one thing that you absolutely need to input inside your caption file. Since for each image, we basically censored the face with a black square or a black blob, in that caption, for Stable Diffusion to understand that this is really not supposed to be part of the outfit, you need to input the following words: identity sensor, faceless, and head out of frame. These are the words that you absolutely need to input in each caption where you censored a face. This is absolutely crucial. And also always start the caption with what the image is supposed to be. Is it a photo? Is it a drawing? Is it a screenshot? Etc, etc. This will make it much easier for Stable Diffusion to understand what your image is supposed to be. So in this case, for example, it is a photo of a yellow cyberpunk jacket, identity sensor, faceless, head out of frame, black t-shirt, black pants, and white background. Simple as that. And yes, in our case, since we are training the jacket, you want to say that the black t-shirt and the black pants and the white background and the censored face are not part of the outfit. Only this area, this yellow cyberpunk jacket, which are used in the instance and class prompt, are part of what we want to train. And you're gonna do that for every single image in your dataset. And this section is really well done because you can just click next, because every single image is separated into different pages. However, if here you have an image that is straight from a video game, instead of putting photo, you can input something like 3D Unreal Engine render of a yellow cyberpunk jacket, identity sensor, faceless, head out of frame, and then input the rest of the image, which in our case it was a simple purple bra, dark pants, and white background. But here, in our case, in this image, since this is an image from a 3D video game, for Stable Diffusion to understand it correctly, you can simply say that this is a 3D render of the clothing item that you want to train. Simple as that. And once you're done, you should be left with the entire folder with both images, and for each image, the corresponding caption file. However, let's say that for example, you made a mistake in all of the files. Let's say that for example, instead of putting yellow cyberpunk jacket, you actually meant to put a light orange cyberpunk jacket. Instead of going manually into each and every one of those caption files and doing it yourself, you can use this really cool tool that I created called Text Replacer, where you can basically input the folder where your captions are, then input the file extensions. So in our case, it is a .txt file. Then for the search text, you want to input what exactly you want to replace in the documents. So like for example, in our case, it was yellow. So I'm gonna put yellow right here, and then here you're gonna input what you want to replace the text with. So in our case, I want to replace it with light orange instead. So now if I click start, in only 1 second, you can see that every one of those caption files have light orange instead of yellow. And all of that in 1 single second, which is really super useful. And if you want to go back to the way it was, you can simply click on this undo button. And now once again, you have the yellow text instead. So yeah, this is a really cool piece of software that I created, that I basically use all the time, and that is available for my Patreon supporters. The link for it will be in the description down below. And speaking of Patreon, if you are one of my Patreon supporters, today you will not only receive all the exclusive models that I released previously, but you will also receive the yellow Cyberpunk 2077 jacket LORA model, a very special butterfly wings LORA model, a very cool Sin City movie style, a special old school anime 80s style, the special LORA Peaky Blinders suit, the 5 cloth training presets that will make LORA training much faster and much easier, and finally the clothing guide PDF that will make searching for the right clothing items and outfits much easier. And all of those tools and more are available right now from my Patreon supporters. So that being said, once you're finally done with the captioning and that you inputted the configuration file training and all the folders fields are filled in, technically you are completely done. You can just scroll down and click on start training. If you are one of my Patreon supporters, you really don't need to do anything anymore. However, I will still explain a few things so that you know which parameters are the best for the closed training. Now again, I'm not gonna go into too much details. If you want to have way more information on how each parameters really work, again, I highly recommend that you watch my previous LoRa training video first. But here, in our case, for the closed training, for the train batch size, you're gonna input that number at 2. I actually highly recommend leaving that number at 2 and not increasing it further. This is actually an amazing parameter for closed training, because I actually noticed that the higher the number, the less precise the final model is going to be. However, although it will be less precise, it will be a little bit more flexible, meaning that if you want to apply a style to it, it will be much better than if the batch size was 1. But again, unfortunately, the higher the number and the less precise it's going to be. However, by keeping this number at 2, we not only get the precision of a lower batch size, but also the flexibility of a higher number, which basically makes this number the best number for training, clothing and outfits. So again, for this number, for the batch size, just leave it at 2. Now again, for the epoch and save every epoch, you're gonna put that number at 15 so that you have more models to choose from. For the mixed precision and save precision, if you have a GPU newer than the NVIDIA 3000 series, you're gonna input BF16 for both. If your GPU is older, you need to choose FP16 for both. But in my case, since I have a 3090, I'm gonna leave it at BF16. Make sure the cache latent and cache latents to disk are checked. For the schedule and optimizer, choose constant, add a factor with those optimizer arguments. Again, everything will be in the description down below. So for the learning rate, which again is something that I put a lot of time into testing, the best learning rate for closed training is between 0.0006 and 0.0009, with a little preference for the higher value. Really, everything higher than that really increases the chance of overtraining, but I found that this value is really the best for this type of training. So then max resolution, again just leave it by default, or 786 by 786 might also work if you don't have a lot of VRAM, but obviously leave it at default by 1024 by 1024 will give you the best results. Then make sure that enable buckets is checked. This is really an amazing option that make it so we don't need to crop our images, they will be trained the way they are, so this is a really good option to have. For the text encoded learning rate and unit learning rate, you're gonna input the same number as the learning rate that you have right here, then you're gonna leave that by default. And then for the network rank and network alpha, exactly like for the style training, the best parameters that I found for the network rank is 128 and for the network alpha it is 1. However, keep in mind that this number can also be a little bit lower, such as 64 or 32, and retain a lot of the information, all the while using less VRAM for training and creating a very light LoRa file. So if this is something that you really want, you're gonna input the network rank to something like 32 instead of 128. But in my case, since I want the best results possible, I'm gonna leave it at 128 instead. Then if you scroll down and go to advanced, you're basically gonna leave everything by default, but make sure that you have grading checkpointing checked. And then here you have two very interesting options, color augmentation and flip augmentation. Now what those two actually really cool options do is that color augmentation will actually for each image change the hue a little bit so that each image will have a little bit of a different color, the same color. That color augmentation option is probably not the best to check. So this is very optional, but it can still be pretty useful. And the flip augmentation is actually really cool also, is that it will basically flip the images to increase the amount of images actually to train on. All of that without compromising on the time it takes for training. So basically what it does is that it takes an image and makes an horizontal flip of that image, essentially doubling the amount of images that are trained at the same time. But it does that without actually increasing the amount of training time it takes for the normal training. So if you have pieces of clothing that are symmetrical, you should definitely try checking this option. This is really useful. But again, this is very situational, since usually in most cases, every single pieces of item clothing have a specific side. So although this option exists, I don't think that many of you will be using it. So once this is done, once you've selected all of those options, and we made sure that every single fields in the folders tab have been filled in correctly, and that we selected the right Stable Diffusion XL model, we can finally start the training. And in my case, with those parameters, it takes around 18 GB to do the training, for a total of 2 hours and 30 minutes. Now obviously I'm not gonna do it because I've already done it before, but once this is done, all the finished model will be saved in the output folder right here, called model. Then you're gonna then copy and paste inside the models LoRa folder. And once again, if you don't have a powerful GPU, or if you don't have a GPU at all, instead of doing this training locally, you can do the exact same thing on a website called RunPod. Now again, I'm not going to be explaining how to do that. I've already shown in details how to do the RunPod training in my first LoRa training video. So once again, watch that video first. And in that video, I also show how to choose the best model possible. And again, you're going to use that exact same technique and generate a bunch of images with a bunch of different prompts so that you can then compare them side by side and choose the one that you prefer. Again, it is all a question of personal preference. Choose a model that is both precise and flexible at the same time, meaning a model that can perfectly generate realistic photos of that item, but also stylized versions. And if you want to know what prompt I used from those images, I will leave them in the description down below, so that you can try them out yourself. Oh, and also, if you want to know how exactly are you gonna be able to generate images of your custom character wearing those clothes or outfits, well, here's how to do it. First, you're gonna generate an image of your custom character using the clothing LoRA model that you created. So in my case, I would like to have like Margot Robbie wearing that cyberpunk jacket. So I'm gonna generate an image of a pseudo Margot Robbie wearing the jacket. So in my case, the Margot Robbie is not really Margot Robbie, but the jacket looks good. So now what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna send that image to inpainting. Then I'm gonna select my brush, draw over the face, just like that. Then in my prompt, I'm simply gonna input the token that I used for the LoRA. In my case, it was Margot Robbie woman. And then I'm gonna input the Margot Robbie LoRA. Make sure that I have selected only masked. And then a little bit of a lower denoising strength. So something like maybe 0.55. And now if I click on generate, and then lo and behold, we have Margot Robbie wearing the infamous yellow cyberpunk jacket. And you can use this very simple technique to generate images of your custom character wearing those custom clothes. So yeah, simple as that. And there you go. Now once again, after this video, now you know how to train any clothes and outfits for Stable Diffusion using LoRa. And do not forget that if you have any issues whatsoever, I offer priority support for my Patreon supporters on both Patreon and on my private supporter channel on my Discord server. So again, if you're interested in that, the link for it will be in the description down below. So that being said, try it out yourself and have some fun. And there we have it, folks. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Thank you also so much to my Patreon supporters for supporting my videos. You guys are absolutely awesome. You people are literally the reason why I'm able to do these videos. So really, thank you so much. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.